Lena Carter had mastered the art of holding herself together. In the emergency department, where fluorescent lights never dimmed, she moved with practiced calm, stitching wounds, steadying hands, whispering reassurances to strangers on the worst days of their lives. Her patients called her kind. Her colleagues called her reliable. No one called her at night. Her apartment overlooked a grey stretch of Seattle sky, the kind that pressed low against the windows like a quiet weight. Most evenings, Lena sat alone at the small kitchen table, reheating leftovers, scrolling through her phone, telling herself that solitude was simply the price of independence. It was during one of those nights that the message appeared. Simple, polite, almost forgettable. A man named Cola commented on a photo she had posted, something about her smile looking honest. She nearly ignored it, but something about the word honest lingered. Their conversations began cautiously, then deepened with surprising speed. Cola spoke of Lagos, of warm evenings, of family and faith. He listened in a way that felt rare, asking about her childhood, her exhaustion, the quiet ache she never named. When she admitted she sometimes felt invisible, he replied, "I see you, Lena." And for the first time in years, she believed someone did. Weeks turned into months. Video calls replaced texts, laughter replaced silence. He called her his future, his answered prayer. The intensity should have unsettled her, but instead it wrapped around her like warmth. When he spoke of marriage, it didn't feel sudden. It felt inevitable. The announcement came quietly. In the staff break room, between sips of lukewarm coffee, Lena mentioned she would be taking leave. A co-worker, Marissa, looked up, brows knitting slightly. "For how long?" she asked. Lena hesitated, then smiled. "I'm going to Nigeria," she said. "I'm getting married." The room fell into a brief, uncertain silence. Marissa forced a grin, but concern flickered beneath it. "Have you met him in person?" she asked gently. Lena shook her head. "Not yet. But I know him." The certainty in her voice ended the conversation, though it did little to settle the unease lingering in the room. The days leading to her departure passed in a blur of packing, paperwork, and late-night calls. Cola's voice remained steady, reassuring, guiding her through every detail. "Trust me," he would say. "Everything is ready." At the airport, the world felt strangely distant, as if she were already stepping into another life. The terminal buzzed with movement, announcements echoing overhead, strangers passing without noticing her quiet transformation. She clutched her passport, her ticket, her phone, each object grounding her in reality. Then her phone vibrated. A message appeared from an unknown number. No greeting. No explanation. Just 6 words. "Trust no one when you land." Lena's breath caught. Her eyes scanned the crowd, searching for something she couldn't define. For a moment, doubt pressed sharply against her chest. Then her phone rang. "Cola," she answered, forcing a smile into her voice. "I'm boarding," she said. His tone was warm, steady, familiar. "Good," he replied. "I'll be waiting." Lena looked once more at the message, her thumb hovering over the screen. Then she locked her phone, slipped it into her bag, and stepped forward as her flight was called. Behind her, unnoticed, another phone screen lit up with her photo, her name, and a single word. "Arrived." The plane doors closed with a hollow finality, sealing her choice into motion. As the engines roared to life, Lena leaned back, eyes closing briefly, holding on to the version of love she believed awaited her on the other side of the ocean, unaware that the warning she had dismissed would soon become the only truth she could no longer escape. The message would echo later, louder, sharper, when the ground beneath her certainty finally cracked, and every promise she trusted began to unravel into something far darker. The hum of the airplane engine settled into a dull, constant rhythm, but Lena couldn't sleep. The message lingered in her mind, replaying in fragments she couldn't fully silence. "Trust no one when you land." It felt out of place, almost absurd against everything she believed about Cola. And yet, something about it clung to her thoughts like a shadow. She closed her eyes, and memory pulled her backward. It had started so simply. A comment. A reply. Then longer conversations that stretched late into the night. Kohler had a way of asking questions that felt different from anyone else. Not surface-level curiosity, but something deeper, something intentional. He wanted to know what made her tired, what made her cry, what made her feel invisible. "You give so much to others," he had said once, his voice soft through her phone speaker. "But who takes care of you?" No one had ever asked her that before. From that moment, something shifted. Lena began to wait for his messages, to check her phone between patients, during breaks, even in the quiet seconds between tasks. His presence filled spaces she hadn't realized were empty. He told her about his life in Nigeria, his business, his family, his responsibilities. He spoke with pride, but also vulnerability. "Sometimes I feel alone too," he admitted during one call. "Even when I'm surrounded by people." It mirrored her own loneliness so perfectly that it felt like fate. As weeks passed, their connection deepened into something intense, almost consuming. He began calling her every morning and every night. If she missed a call, he would text again. And again. Not angrily, but persistently. "I worry about you," he would say. "I just need to know you're okay." At first, it felt like care. Then it became expectation. Lena found herself adjusting her schedule around him, stepping away from co-workers to answer calls, choosing quiet over conversation so she wouldn't miss his voice. When Marissa once joked, "You've disappeared lately," Lena laughed it off, but something about the comment stayed with her. Kohler didn't like when she talked about other people. "They don't understand you," he told her gently. "They see the surface. I see everything." And Lena believed him. There were small moments, tiny cracks, that didn't quite fit. Times when his tone shifted too quickly, when questions felt more like quiet interrogations. If she mentioned going out, he would grow silent before saying, "I just don't like the idea of anyone taking your attention away from what we have." She interpreted it as love, as devotion, because the alternative was harder to face. One evening, during a video call, Lena noticed something unusual. His background was different, not just rearranged, but entirely unfamiliar. When she asked about it, he smiled too quickly. "Just staying with a friend for a few days," he said. It should have ended there. But later that night, curiosity nudged her. She scrolled through his older social media posts, something she hadn't done in a while. That's when she saw it. A name. Not Kohler. A different profile, older photos, the same face, but under another identity. Her stomach tightened. The next time they spoke, she brought it up carefully, trying to keep her voice steady. "I saw another account. With your picture. A different name." There was a pause. For a moment, his expression hardened, just briefly, like a crack in glass. Then it softened again, replaced by a calm, reassuring smile. "I was hoping you wouldn't find that," he said quietly. "It's nothing bad. Just safety." "Safety," Lena repeated. "In my country, you have to be careful," he explained. "Business, trust, people trying to take advantage. I use different names sometimes to protect myself. It's normal here." His voice was steady, convincing, wrapped in logic she couldn't fully challenge. "You trust me, don't you?" he asked. Lena hesitated. Then she nodded. But as the call ended and the screen went dark, the question lingered in the silence around her, heavier now than before, quietly threading doubt into something she had once believed was unbreakable. The question followed Lena even as the plane descended, pressing gently against her thoughts like something unfinished. "You trust me, don't you?" She had said yes, but the word hadn't settled the way it once would have. It lingered, fragile, as the ground below came into view. When the plane doors opened, a wave of heat wrapped around her instantly. Thick, unfamiliar, alive. The air carried scents she couldn't place, a mixture of fuel, earth, and something sweet that felt almost disorienting after the sterile cold of Seattle. Voices overlapped in accents she struggled to follow, the rhythm of conversation faster, louder, more urgent. Lena tightened her grip on her bag as she moved through the airport, her senses overwhelmed. Everything felt heightened, the colors, the sounds, the movement. For a moment, she felt very small inside it all. Then she saw him. Kohler stood just beyond the crowd, exactly where he said he would be. He smiled the moment their eyes met, lifting a hand in recognition. Relief rushed through her so quickly it almost erased everything else. He was real. As she walked toward him, her heartbeat quickened. Up close, he looked the same, and not the same at all. His smile was familiar, his voice warm when he said her name, but there was something in his presence that felt heavier. Less filtered. Less controlled than the version she knew through a screen. "Lena," he said softly, pulling her into an embrace. For a moment, she relaxed into it, letting herself believe in the reality of him. But as he held her, she noticed how quickly his arms tightened, how firmly he kept her there before pulling back. "You made it," he added, studying her face carefully, as if confirming something. "You're exactly how I imagined," she replied, forcing a smile. He laughed lightly, but his eyes lingered on her just a second too long. The drive from the airport blurred past in flashes of unfamiliar streets, crowded intersections, and buildings that seemed to stretch endlessly. Kohler talked as he drove, pointing things out, explaining places, filling the silence with easy confidence. Lena listened, nodding, but her attention drifted between his voice and the world outside. It was real. All of it. When they finally arrived, the house stood behind a tall gate, slightly removed from the noise of the street. It looked modest but well kept, with a stillness that felt almost deliberate. Inside, she was greeted immediately. Voices. Smiles. Hands reaching for hers. "This is my family," Kohler said. A woman introduced as his aunt embraced her warmly, speaking quickly, her smile wide but her eyes unreadable. A man nodded politely from across the room. Another younger woman hovered nearby, quiet, watching more than speaking. Lena tried to keep up, responding with polite smiles, but something felt off. The interactions were too smooth. Too practiced. As if everyone already knew exactly what role they were meant to play. Kohler stayed close to her side, guiding her gently, answering questions before she could, filling in spaces she hadn't realized were empty. It should have felt comforting. Instead, it felt controlled. Later, as the house quieted and the evening settled into a tense stillness, Lena found herself alone in the hallway. The walls felt closer now, the air heavier than before. She walked slowly, taking in her surroundings, trying to ground herself in something familiar. That's when she noticed the door. It stood at the end of the hallway, slightly different from the others. The handle was older, worn. A small lock sat just beneath it. Something about it pulled her closer. She hesitated, glancing over her shoulder. The house was quiet. No voices. No movement. Carefully, she stepped forward. Her fingers hovered near the handle. Then, a sound. Soft. Faint. But unmistakable. Something moved inside. Lena froze, her breath catching as the silence stretched around her. The sound came again, subtle, like shifting weight or fabric brushing against something. Her pulse quickened. Before she could react, a voice broke through behind her. "Lena." She turned sharply. Kohler stood at the end of the hallway, his expression calm, but his eyes fixed directly on her. "You shouldn't go there," he said quietly. The softness in his voice didn't match the firmness of his tone. Lena stepped back slowly, her heart pounding as she forced a small, uncertain smile. "I was just looking around," she said. Kohler held her gaze for a moment longer than necessary. Then he smiled. But this time, it didn't reach his eyes. And as Lena followed him back, the faint sound behind that locked door echoed once more in her mind. No longer something she could ignore, but something that had already begun to unravel the version of reality she had traveled so far to believe. Expansion now expand the following chapter of the story. Make sure it has a seamless transition from the previous one and ends in a way that leads smoothly into the next. Strictly follow exactly words count here is the chapter sad smiley paste chapter title or summary here. The sound behind the locked door refused to fade. It followed Lena into the night, slipping into her thoughts, replaying in the quiet spaces between breaths. She lay awake on the unfamiliar bed, staring at the ceiling as shadows shifted faintly along the walls. Every small noise felt amplified, the creak of wood, the distant hum of voices, the subtle movement of air through the house. Sleep never came. By morning, the exhaustion sat heavy behind her eyes, blurring the edges of everything. But it wasn't just fatigue. It was something deeper. Something unsettled. At breakfast, Kola behaved as if nothing had happened. His voice was calm, his smile steady, his attention focused entirely on her. He asked how she slept, if she was comfortable, if she needed anything. Lena hesitated before answering. "I thought I heard something last night," she said carefully. "From that room." For a fraction of a second, his expression tightened. Then it softened again. "You're in a new place," he replied gently. "Your mind is adjusting. It happens." "It didn't feel like nothing," she pressed, her voice quieter now. "It sounded like someone was inside." Kola leaned closer, lowering his tone as if speaking something intimate. "Lena," he said, "you have to trust me. There is nothing there." The words should have reassured her. Instead, they made something twist inside her chest. "You've been under stress," he continued. "Long hours, emotional strain. It's normal for your mind to play tricks when things finally slow down." She stared at him, searching for something, anything, that didn't feel rehearsed. "You don't believe me," he added softly. "I want to," she said. His gaze sharpened slightly. "Then do it," he replied. "Trust me. Not your fears." The conversation ended there, but the tension lingered, heavy and unspoken. As the day passed, Lena found herself withdrawing. She spoke less, observed more. The house no longer felt unfamiliar. It felt wrong. Every glance, every movement, every interaction seemed layered with something she couldn't fully understand. And then there was Amora. She moved quietly through the house, rarely speaking, her presence almost ghost-like. But her eyes were always watching. That afternoon, as Lena stood alone near the back of the house, Amora approached her slowly. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, Amora said, "You hear things too." Lena's breath caught. "You heard it?" she asked quickly. Amora didn't answer right away. Her gaze shifted briefly toward the hallway, then back to Lena. "You should not ask questions," she murmured. "Amora," Lena stepped closer. "Please. Just tell me what's going on." There was a long pause. Then Amora leaned in slightly, her voice trembling now. "You are not the first," she whispered. The words hit harder than anything Lena had expected. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice unsteady. Amora's eyes filled with something dark, fear, memory, something heavier than both. "Others came," she said. "Like you. Believed him. Trusted him." Lena felt the ground shift beneath her. "Where are they?" she asked. Amora shook her head slowly. "They do not leave," she said. A chill ran through Lena's body. Before she could say anything else, Amora stepped back, her expression closing off again as footsteps echoed faintly from the front of the house. "Say nothing," she added quickly, before turning away. Lena stood frozen, her mind racing, her chest tightening with every breath. The house felt smaller now. Closer. That night, driven by something she could no longer suppress, Lena returned to the hallway. The locked door stood exactly as it had before. Silent. Still. But this time, she didn't stop there. She moved past it. Toward the wall beside it. At first, she saw nothing. Then, as her eyes adjusted to the dim light, faint lines began to appear. Thin, uneven marks etched into the surface. Her heart began to pound. She stepped closer. Closer. Until the shapes formed words. Scratched deep enough to break through the paint. Desperate. Uneven. Real. He doesn't let us leave alive. Lena's breath caught in her throat as the reality of it settled in. Not fear. Not imagination. Truth. And somewhere behind that locked door, something shifted again. The words carved into the wall did not leave Lena's mind. They followed her into every room, echoed in every silence, pressed against her chest with a weight she could no longer ignore. He doesn't let us leave alive. It wasn't just a warning. It was a confession written by someone who had already lost hope. And now, Lena understood something with terrifying clarity. If she stayed, she would become another message on that wall. The next morning, she avoided Kola's gaze, forcing herself into a quiet, careful routine. Every movement felt calculated now, every word measured. She nodded when he spoke, smiled when expected, played the role he seemed to want her to play. Inside, she was already gone. It wasn't until late afternoon that she found Amora again. This time, there was no hesitation. "We have to leave," Lena whispered urgently, her voice barely steady. Amora stiffened, her eyes darting toward the hallway before settling back on Lena. "You think I have not tried?" she replied quietly. "Then we try again," Lena insisted. "Together." For a moment, it seemed Amora might refuse. Fear flickered across her face, deep and familiar. But beneath it, something else surfaced, something fragile, almost forgotten. "Hope. He leaves tonight," Amora said finally. "For a few hours." Lena's heart pounded. "That's our chance." The plan formed quickly, pieced together in hushed whispers and stolen moments. They would wait until the house was quiet, until the last sound of Cola's car faded into distance. Then they would move. No bags. No hesitation. Just run. Night came slowly, stretching every second into something unbearable. Lena sat in silence, her body tense, listening for the moment everything shifted. When the front door finally closed and the sound of the engine disappeared into the distance, the house fell into a stillness that felt almost unnatural. Amora appeared in the doorway. "It's time," she said. They moved quickly, quietly, their footsteps barely touching the ground. Every shadow felt alive, every creak too loud. Lena's pulse roared in her ears as they reached the front door. For a brief second, she hesitated. Then she stepped outside. The air hit her like freedom. They didn't stop. Barefoot against rough pavement, they ran through unfamiliar streets, guided only by instinct and urgency. The night stretched wide around them, filled with distant voices, passing lights, and the constant fear of being seen. "Which way?" Lena asked, breathless. "Just keep moving," Amora replied. They turned corners without thinking, crossing into spaces that felt both open and endless. Lena's lungs burned, her legs aching, but she didn't slow down. Not now. Not when escape was finally within reach. For a moment, just a moment, it felt possible. Then headlights cut through the darkness. A car slowed beside them. Too slowly. Lena's chest tightened as the vehicle matched their pace, its presence heavy, deliberate. "Don't look," Amora whispered. But Lena already had. The window rolled down. A man she didn't recognize stared at them, his expression calm, almost amused. "Going somewhere?" he asked. The word sent a chill through her entire body. Amora grabbed Lena's arm. "Run." They tried. But it was too late. The car door opened before they could react. Hands reached out, firm, unyielding. Lena struggled, her voice breaking as panic surged through her. "Let me go." Her cries were swallowed by the night. She caught a glimpse of Amora being pulled away, her resistance weaker, her face filled with something that looked less like fear now and more like resignation. Lena fought harder, desperation clawing through her chest. "Please, please." But no one came. The man leaned closer, his voice low, almost casual. "You shouldn't have tried that." Lena's body froze. Not because of the words, but because she recognized the voice behind him. From the shadows, Cola stepped forward. Calm, composed, watching. And in that moment, as her resistance faded into something colder, something heavier, Lena realized the truth she had been trying to outrun. Cola had never been alone. He had been waiting. Cola had never been alone. The realization settled into Lena like something cold and permanent as she was forced back into the house, her wrists aching from the grip that had dragged her inside. The brief illusion of escape dissolved completely, replaced by something far more suffocating. Control. This was never just one man. It was a system. They didn't bother pretending anymore. The warmth in Cola's voice, the softness in his expressions, it all slipped away, revealing something sharper underneath. Something practiced. "You made this harder than it needed to be," he said calmly, watching her as if she were a problem to be managed, not a person. Lena said nothing. Her chest rose and fell unevenly, her mind racing, trying to grasp the full weight of what she had walked into. The man from the car leaned against the wall, arms crossed, observing quietly. Another figure appeared briefly in the doorway, then disappeared again. Faces she hadn't seen before. Faces that confirmed what she feared. There were more of them. How many? Lena whispered, her voice barely audible. Kohler tilted his head slightly. Enough, he replied. The answer told her everything. They separated her from Amora without explanation. The silence between them as they were pulled apart felt heavier than any words could have carried. Lena reached for her instinctively, but the distance closed too quickly. Wait, she started. Amora didn't resist. She just looked at Lena. And in that look, there was no hope left. Hours passed, maybe more. Time lost its meaning inside the walls of that house. Lena sat alone, her thoughts spiraling, replaying every moment that had brought her here. Every message. Every promise. Every time she chose to believe instead of question. Now she understood. She had never been chosen. She had been selected. The door opened quietly. Amora stepped inside. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The air between them felt fragile, like something that could break if touched too quickly. Then Lena stood, her voice trembling. Tell me everything. Amora hesitated, then closed the door behind her. It does not matter now, she said softly. It matters to me, Lena insisted. A long silence followed. Then, slowly, Amora began. I met him the same way, she said. Online. Different name. Different story. But the same words. Her gaze drifted, as if pulled into a memory she could not escape. He said I was special. That I understood him. Lena felt a hollow ache form in her chest. He brought me here, Amora continued. Just like you. What happened? Lena asked quietly. Amora's lips pressed together. I tried to leave, she said. Many times. And the others? Lena pushed. Amora looked at her then, really looked at her, and whatever Lena saw there made her wish she hadn't asked. They do not stay long, Amora said. The words landed heavily between them. They take them, she added. Move them. Sell them. Lena's breath caught. Sell them, to who? Amora shook her head slowly. People who do not ask questions. The room seemed to shrink around them. Lena stepped back, her hands trembling. No, that's not. It is, Amora said, her voice breaking slightly. This place is only the beginning. The truth settled in fully now, crushing whatever remained of Lena's denial. This wasn't about love. It wasn't even about one crime. It was something larger. Organized. Systematic. And she was already inside it. The door opened again. Kohler entered, his presence filling the room instantly. He glanced between them, his expression unreadable. I see you've been talking, he said. Neither of them responded. He stepped closer to Lena, his gaze steady, almost clinical now. You have a choice, he continued. Lena's heart pounded. A choice, she repeated. He nodded once. You cooperate, he said calmly, or you make things difficult. Her voice trembled. What does that mean? Kohler held her gaze for a moment, then spoke without emotion. It means, he said, you will be sold. The word echoed in her mind, louder than anything else. Sold. And in that moment, Lena understood something with terrifying clarity. Escape was never the plan. Survival was. The word sold did not fade. It stayed with Lena long after Kohler left the room, echoing through her mind with a finality that stripped away everything she had been holding on to. There was no misunderstanding now, no space for denial, no version of reality where this ended safely. She sat motionless, her hands resting in her lap, her breathing shallow and uneven. For the first time since arriving, the truth settled completely. She was not in control. And no one was coming to save her. Something inside her began to shift. Not panic. Not fear. Something colder. Lena had spent years in hospital rooms, watching people break under pressure, studying the way trauma changed behavior, how survival instincts rewired the mind. She had always been the one offering reassurance, guiding others through their worst moments. Now she was the one inside it. And she understood something with sudden clarity. Survival wasn't about strength. It was about adaptation. When Kola returned later that evening, Lena was no longer sitting in the same rigid silence. She had moved to the edge of the bed, her posture softer, her expression quieter. He noticed immediately. "You look different," he said, studying her carefully. Lena lowered her gaze, letting her voice tremble just enough. "I've been thinking," she replied. He didn't interrupt. "I don't want to fight you," she continued. "I didn't understand before. I thought I was losing everything." She paused, letting the words settle. "But maybe I was just afraid of trusting you completely." Kola's eyes narrowed slightly, searching for something beneath her tone. "And now?" he asked. Lena looked up slowly, meeting his gaze. "Now I realize I don't have anyone else here," she said quietly. "Just you." The silence stretched between them. It was a risk. A calculated one. Kola stepped closer, his expression unreadable. "That's a dangerous realization," he said. "Why?" Lena asked softly. "Because it can be true," he replied. Their eyes locked, the tension shifting into something sharper, more deliberate. This was no longer about emotion. It was a test. And Lena knew it. She forced herself to hold his gaze, to steady her breathing, to let her voice carry something that sounded like surrender. "I don't want to make things harder," she said. "I'll do what you ask." Kola watched her for a long moment. Too long. Then, slowly, he smiled. Not warmly, not kindly, but with something that felt almost curious. "You're learning," he said. Lena said nothing. Inside, her pulse hammered against her ribs, every instinct screaming at her to run, to fight, to do anything but this. But she held still. Because this was the only move she had left. The next few hours unfolded in a strange, fragile balance. Kola stayed close, observing her, speaking in calm, measured tones as if guiding her into a role she was expected to play. He asked small questions, watched her responses, studied every hesitation. Lena answered carefully, choosing every word with precision. She smiled when expected, agreed when necessary, yielded when it mattered. Each moment felt like walking a thin line between survival and exposure. And yet, beneath it all, something else grew. A plan. Not a complete one. Not yet. But the beginning of something. If she could make him believe her, truly believe her, then maybe, just maybe, she could find another chance. A better one. Later, as the house fell into quiet once again, Lena allowed herself a single moment of stillness. Her hands trembled slightly as she pressed them together, grounding herself in the reality she could not escape. She had crossed a line. There was no going back to who she had been before. The caregiver. The healer. The woman who believed in people. That version of her was gone. What remained was someone else. Someone who understood that survival sometimes meant becoming something you never thought you could be. The door opened without warning. Kola stepped inside. Lena looked up, her expression carefully neutral. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then he walked closer, stopping just in front of her. "You're doing very well," he said quietly. Relief flickered briefly in her chest. Too soon. Because then. He leaned in slightly, his voice dropping just enough to shift the air between them. "But you made one mistake." Lena's breath caught. His eyes held hers, steady, unblinking. "I already know," he continued, "that you tried to escape." The words hit like a sudden drop beneath her feet. Every part of her body went still. Kola's lips curved slowly into a calm, almost gentle smile. And this time, there was no warmth in it at all. There was no warmth in it at all. Kola's smile lingered just long enough to settle the truth into Lena's chest like a weight she could not lift. The fragile balance she had tried to build collapsed instantly. Every word she had chosen, every expression she had controlled, it had all been seen through. Or worse. Allowed. Lena forced herself not to move, not to react beyond a slow inhale that barely steadied her. "I panicked," she said quietly, her voice thin but controlled. "I didn't understand what was happening." Kola studied her, his gaze searching deeper now, as if peeling back the final layers she had tried to hide behind. "And now you do?" he asked. She nodded once. A long silence followed. Then he stepped back, the tension easing just slightly. "Good," he said. "Because tonight, you will decide what happens next." The words settled heavily between them. "What does that mean?" Lena asked, her pulse quickening. "It means," Kohler replied, "you prove that you belong here, or you don't." He turned and walked toward the door, pausing only briefly before adding, "I'll come back." Then he was gone. The room felt smaller than ever. Lena exhaled slowly, her body trembling now that the control she had forced was slipping. She pressed her hands against her face, her thoughts racing, spiraling toward a truth she could no longer deny. There was no next chance. No second attempt. Whatever happened now would be final. Her eyes moved instinctively around the room, searching, not for escape this time, but for something else. Something that could outlast her. Her gaze landed on her bag, half hidden beneath the bed where it had been left untouched. Slowly, carefully, she moved toward it, every step deliberate, every breath measured as if the walls themselves were watching. Inside, buried beneath folded clothes and forgotten items, was her phone. Dead. Useless. But not entirely. Her fingers moved quickly, pulling out a small portable charger she had packed without thinking. Her hands shook as she connected it, watching the screen flicker faintly before lighting up. A small, fragile window of time. She didn't hesitate. Opening the camera, she switched it to video mode, angling it slightly as she placed it against the wall, hidden just enough to avoid immediate notice. For a moment, she couldn't speak. Her reflection stared back at her from the screen. Tired, pale, unfamiliar. Then she forced herself forward. "My name is Lena Carter," she whispered, her voice trembling despite her effort to steady it. "If anyone finds this, I came here because I thought I was in love." Her breath caught, but she pushed through. "His name is Kohler. I don't know if that's real. There are others. This isn't just him, it's a network. They bring women here. They don't let them leave." Her eyes filled, but she didn't stop. "I tried to escape," she continued. "If you're watching this, please don't trust him. Don't come here. Don't believe." A sound outside the door cut her off. Footsteps. Close. Lena's heart slammed against her chest as she reached forward, stopping the recording just in time and hiding the phone beneath the mattress. The door opened. Kohler stepped inside. But this time, he wasn't alone. The man from before stood behind him, silent, watchful. The air shifted instantly. "This is it," Kohler said calmly. Lena stood slowly, her legs unsteady but her gaze fixed. "I told you," he continued, "you would decide." Something inside her snapped. Not fear. Not hesitation. Something sharper. "You think this is control?" she said suddenly, her voice stronger now, breaking through the tension. "You think this makes you powerful?" The words surprised even her. Kohler's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Lena stepped closer, her hands clenched. "You hide behind lies. Behind people. You take from others because you have nothing real of your own." The silence that followed was heavy, dangerous. The man behind Kohler shifted slightly. Kohler raised a hand, stopping him. Then he looked back at Lena. And smiled again. But this time, there was something darker in it. "Careful," he said softly. Lena didn't stop. "You can't control everything," she said. "Not forever." For a brief second, the air felt like it might break. Then everything moved at once. A hand reached. Lena struggled. The room blurred into motion. Shouts, resistance, the sharp sound of something falling. Her breath came in fragments, her body fighting against something stronger, something inevitable. The last thing she saw was the edge of the bed. The last thing she heard was her own voice, lost somewhere between defiance and fear. And then, nothing. Silence. The story stops here. For now. Silence. That was how the story resumed, not with answers, but with absence. The road stretched empty beneath the early morning haze, dust lifting faintly with each passing breeze. It was a remote stretch, far enough from the city to feel forgotten, the kind of place where things were left behind and rarely questioned. Until someone did. A local driver noticed them first, for suitcases lined unevenly near the edge of the road. They looked ordinary at a distance. Travel-worn. Abandoned, perhaps. But something about their placement felt wrong. Too deliberate. Too still. He didn't touch them. He called it in. By the time authorities arrived, the air had shifted. What began as curiosity hardened quickly into something heavier, something unmistakable. Officers approached cautiously, exchanging brief glances that said more than words. The first suitcase was opened slowly, then closed just as quickly. The second confirmed it. By the third, no one spoke at all. 4 suitcases. Each one carrying pieces of something that had once been whole. The scene was secured immediately, the area sealed off as investigators moved with careful precision. Gloves. Cameras. Measured steps. But beneath the routine, there was tension, an awareness that this was not random. This was intentional. Hours turned into days as the investigation deepened. Forensic teams worked through what remained, reconstructing identity from fragments, searching for anything that could lead them back to a name. A story. A life. It didn't take long for patterns to emerge. Foreign clothing labels. Personal items that didn't belong locally. And then, a small detail. A medical ID tag, partially damaged but still legible enough to begin narrowing the search. The name surfaced quietly at first. Then with certainty. Lena Carter. The confirmation moved quickly beyond borders. Authorities contacted officials abroad, cross-checking records, verifying details. Within days, the case was no longer local. It was international. Back in Seattle, the news broke with a sharp, devastating clarity. A nurse who had traveled overseas. A woman who had trusted someone she believed she loved. Now reduced to evidence. The story spread rapidly, headlines carrying fragments of truth that only hinted at the full horror. Questions followed just as quickly. Who brought her there? Who did this? And how had it gone unnoticed? Investigators returned to the house linked to the case, but what they found raised more questions than answers. It had been cleared out, emptied with precision. No signs of struggle. No clear evidence left behind. Only absence. But absence, they realized, could still speak. Neighbors reported unfamiliar activity. Different faces. Vehicles coming and going at irregular hours. Nothing concrete. Nothing that had seemed urgent at the time. Now, it meant everything. As the search widened, small fragments began to connect. Names that didn't match records. Transactions that didn't align. Movements that suggested something far larger than a single incident. This wasn't isolated. It was organized. And Lena was not the only one. One investigator paused at a wall inside the house, his gaze fixed on faint markings barely visible beneath a fresh layer of paint. The surface had been altered, but not completely. Not enough to erase what had been there. He leaned closer. Lines. Scratches. Words that had tried to survive. They photographed everything. Documented every inch. Because now, it wasn't just about identifying the victim. It was about understanding the system that had taken her. Days later, a quiet discovery shifted everything. Hidden within the structure of the house, in a place easily overlooked, something was found. A device. Small. Damaged. But not destroyed. When recovered and examined, it revealed something investigators had not expected. A recording. Incomplete. Interrupted. But real. And as they prepared to play it, the room fell into a silence that felt heavier than anything before. Because if Lena had left a message, then she hadn't been alone. And somewhere, beyond what had already been uncovered, there were still pieces missing. Not just of what happened, but of who else had survived. The room held its breath as the recording began. Static cracked through the speakers first, uneven and broken, followed by a flicker of movement on the screen. The image struggled to stabilize, but then, her face. Lena. Tired. Frightened. Real. Her voice trembled as she spoke, each word carrying the weight of someone who knew time was running out. Investigators stood in silence, listening as her message unfolded. Names, fragments, warnings. Not everything was clear, but it was enough. Enough to shift the case. What had once been a brutal discovery was now something far larger. A network. The investigation moved quickly after that. Locations were traced. Communications analyzed. Patterns connected across borders. It became evident that Lena had been one of many, her case simply the one that had been found. Raids followed. One after another. Some locations were empty, abandoned just in time. Others revealed evidence, documents, devices, traces of lives interrupted. Each discovery confirmed the same truth. This had been operating for a long time. And it had not been hidden well enough. Amora was found 3 days later. Alive. But barely. She had been moved from the house shortly after Lena's final night, transferred between locations as the network began to fracture under pressure. When authorities reached her, she was silent at first, her body present but her voice distant. It took time, care, patience. But eventually, she spoke. Her testimony filled in the gaps Lena's recording could not. She described the process, the recruitment, the manipulation. The way women were identified, isolated, and brought in under the illusion of love or opportunity. And Kola. She gave them his real name. His movements. His role. He was not the top, she said quietly. But he was trusted. That was enough. The operation tightened around him, narrowing with each piece of information uncovered. 4 days, he remained just out of reach, slipping through spaces that suggested planning, preparation, help. Then, finally, he was found. There was no struggle. No resistance. He surrendered with the same calm expression he had always carried, his hands steady as they were placed in restraints. Observers noted the absence of fear, the lack of urgency in his movements. As if this outcome had always been a possibility he had accepted. During transport, he said nothing. During processing, he remained silent. It wasn't until the interrogation that he spoke. The room was controlled, quiet, designed to hold pressure without showing it. Investigators sat across from him, files laid out, evidence ready. Kola leaned back slightly in his chair, his gaze moving between them with mild curiosity. "You've seen the recording," one investigator began. "You know what this is." Kola smiled faintly. "I know what you think it is," he replied. The tone was calm, measured, detached. "You brought her here," the investigator continued. "You were part of this." "Part of it," Kola repeated, as if considering the phrasing. "Yes." There was no denial. No hesitation. "Why?" Another voice pressed. Kola's expression didn't change. "Because it works," he said simply. The words settled heavily in the room. "You expect us to believe this ends with you?" the first investigator asked. For the first time, something shifted. Not fear. Not regret. Something closer to amusement. Kola leaned forward slightly, resting his arms on the table. "You already know it doesn't," he said. Silence followed. "You found one house," he continued. "One location. One line in something much bigger." His gaze held steady, unwavering. "You think removing me changes anything?" The question lingered, unanswered. "People like me are replaceable," he added. "That's the point." The room felt colder now. More contained. "Then who isn't?" the investigator asked quietly. Kola's smile returned, slow, deliberate, and entirely without warmth. "You're asking the wrong question," he said. A pause. Just long enough. Then, "Who do you think lets it continue?" The words landed harder than anything before. And in that moment, as the weight of what remained unseen settled over the room, the investigation shifted again, not toward closure, but toward something far more dangerous. Because the truth, they realized, did not end with Kola. It had only just begun. It had only just begun. The weight of Kola's final words lingered long after the interrogation ended, settling into every layer of the investigation like something unfinished. His capture had closed one door, but behind it, countless others remained, hidden, protected, or simply ignored. The story spread faster than anyone could contain it. News outlets carried Lena's name across continents, her face appearing on screens and headlines, her story told in fragments that never fully captured what she had endured. A nurse. A traveler. A woman who believed in something real and paid for it with everything. But it wasn't just her story anymore. It became a warning. Authorities released parts of the case carefully, enough to inform, enough to alert, but never enough to reveal the full extent of what had been uncovered. Still, the message reached far beyond official statements. Online relationships. False identities. Carefully constructed trust. People began to look closer. Question more. Doubt what once felt certain. And yet, for every person who stepped back, there were others still standing at the edge of the same illusion. In a quiet room filled with screens and subdued voices, Lena's recording was played again. The footage flickered slightly, damaged but intact enough to carry her voice through. "My name is Lena Carter." The room stilled. Investigators, analysts, and officials listened without interruption as her final message unfolded once more. Her fear, her realization, her desperate attempt to leave something behind that could not be erased. "They bring women here, they don't let them leave." Her voice cracked, but she kept going. "Please, don't trust him." The recording ended abruptly, cutting into silence that felt heavier each time it played. No matter how many times they heard it, it never lost its impact. It didn't just tell them what had happened. It reminded them of what they still didn't know. Kohler had been charged. The case against him was strong, supported by evidence, testimony, and Lena's own words. But even as proceedings moved forward, there was a quiet understanding among those closest to the investigation. This wasn't complete. Not even close. Names remained unverified. Locations unconfirmed. Movements that couldn't yet be traced. Every answer uncovered seemed to reveal two more questions beneath it. Justice, when it came, felt partial. Necessary, but incomplete. Amora was placed under protection, her future uncertain but her role undeniable. Without her, much of the truth would have remained buried. She spoke when she could, but some things never left her eyes, memories that words could not fully carry. Life continued, as it always did. But not unchanged. Lena's name became something people remembered, not just for what happened, but for what it revealed. Her story moved quietly through conversations, warnings passed between strangers, a reminder that not every connection was what it seemed. And somewhere else, far from where her story ended, it began again. A phone screen lit up in the dark. A woman, alone in her room, scrolled absently, her expression neutral, her thoughts distant. A notification appeared, simple, unremarkable, easy to ignore. But she didn't. She opened it. A message. Polite. Carefully worded. Almost familiar. "Hello. I came across your profile, and I just wanted to say, you seem like someone very honest." The woman hesitated for a moment, then smiled faintly. Her fingers moved across the screen. And as the conversation began, unnoticed and uninterrupted, the name at the top of the chat remained steady. Kohler.